Today's video has kindly been sponsored by myself and my own webshop, hsMVY.shop. If you're looking for scale modeling supplies like paints, kits, and all other things alike, go check it out. We've recently gotten in a couple of new shipments from Scale Production, Highlight Model Studio, No. 5 Paints, and a new shipment is underway from Streetblisters as well. Some Tamiya products have been restocked, and I've also added the XF range of paints to the lineup too, and a lot of Aoshima and other kits are currently and constantly being restocked and refilled. So please go check out my webshop hsMVY.shop and help support the channel. So with the exterior painted and the interior completed and updated, I could move on to the engine and chassis components and also the final assembly of the build, but that will come towards the end of the video. Now I'm fully aware that the chassis and engine are completely incorrect for the Fast and the Furious car. It is the wrong engine and also a four-wheel drive instead of the two-wheel drive from the movie. I'm not going to be correcting that. I will just simply use the parts that I have, modify them here and there just a very tiny bit to look a little better and cleaner, but simply just copy the color scheme from the movie car and make it look close. Not close enough as it is still completely wrong, but just give it a similar vibe to the movie car. For me it doesn't really matter. I know for some of you guys it does, but I'm afraid you'll just have to do with what I'm doing right here. And if you have any other ideas, feel free to make a build video series of your own. I'd be happy to watch you change all of these components and make them look better than I did. Now in the meantime, I've already prepped all of the parts, primed them, and moved on to applying various colors, some silvers, some blacks, and also some clear blue, and on some other components for the rubber hosing and some wires in the engine bay. I'm just using some Tamiya X14, a nice blue that looks pretty close to most of the parts that were used on the movie car engine. Once the paint had enough time to dry, I could move on to just assembling it all with some Bob Smith Industries Super Gold Plus. For some strange reason, there was an extra peg on this belt assembly for on the front, or in this case on the side of the engine, and that made it not fit, so that just needed to be cut off. I was afraid that I was going to be regretting this in the end, as I might have missed something, but everything turned out fine, and it simply just had an extra peg that didn't need to be there, and without it everything glued together really nicely. With most of the engine now assembled, I could just install all of the chassis components, put the engine in place, and then move on to the rest of the finishing work. Once the chassis and engine have been put together, the interior tub along with most of the top half of the engine bay could also be put in place. Some additional parts for the engine could then also be glued in their final position, and then I could turn it back around to do some more assembly on the chassis side, but then for the drive shaft, the exhaust, and also all of the rear suspension and driveline components. With some decals now put on too, I let those cure for a bit and moved on to a tiny bit of weathering, just some black and brown highlighting with some Panelline accent color. That was then set aside to cure, and in the meantime I moved on to painting the clear parts. So I first masked them all off for all of the areas that did not need to be painted, and then painted some flat black around it, removed the masking tape on the rear section so I could tint those with a Tamiya smoke to get a nice dark and tinted look. And in the meantime, while the black was still curing before I applied that tinted look, I moved on to fixing some parts on the rear tail lights. This is also going to be done on the front headlight lenses, as they have some pegs that keep them in place and they look pretty damn awful. So I cut those off and then made the clear part nice and smooth, and also sanded it just a little bit to get some of the deeper scratches out before applying some clear red onto the part and giving it the correct finish. Now this will then be set aside to cure. The middle section will be painted silver from the inside, and the other components will be left clear, as I have some 3D printed parts that I've shown at the beginning of the series to put behind those. Now speaking of 3D printed parts, I also printed a new wing that was part of that same package of parts that was shown at the beginning of the video series. And I also have some new wheels. These were not printed by me, but they were printed by Scale Production and available on their website, scaleproduction.de, if you're interested. With pretty much all the smaller components now painted, I could move on to finishing off some work on the main exterior, or just the body, by painting all of the window trims. So as I mentioned before, the rear section for the clear parts needs to be tinted as dark as possible, but still a bit see-through, so I removed the masking tape on those sections and applied a couple coats of Tamiya smoke. This is a transparent blackish clear coat that just gives it a nice dark tone, and the more coats you apply, the darker it will be. I think I applied about 5 or 6 coats in the end just to get it nice and dark. Now in the meantime, I've moved on to applying the carbon fiber decal on the hood. I changed it out from the one in the kit to a custom cut one with some Scale Motorsport decals, the 1024, just the plain weave carbon fiber. And once that was fully formed to the part, I could move on to applying the decal on top with the silver logo, and that was then all clear coated to give it a nice glossy shine and also some protection. And in the meantime, I've moved on to some more assembly for parts on the inside of the body, and with those all in place, I could put the body and chassis together, put in the screw on the rear, and then start on the final exterior assembly. With the new 3D printed headlight buckets now in place, I could move on to putting the front bumper on as well. That one fit up really nicely and didn't really have any problems. While I say nicely, the one on the movie car didn't fit up nicely either, so it looks pretty similar to the one on the movie car. The rear one is also installed in some of these frames as well, but that simply was not in the right position and was adjusted a little bit later on in the video. Same goes for all of the wheels. I did glue them in place, figuring that the ride height wasn't really too low, as the same goes for the movie car, but in the end I will be readjusting those, lowering it a little bit, and also centering the wheels a bit better in the wheel wells. So just like the taillight lens, the headlight lenses have the same problem, some really big pegs to keep them in place and also give them a bit more of a toyish look and not really a great finish. Those were cut off and flushed out with the rest of the inside of that part, sanded smooth, and then I gave them a nice glossy clear coat to get rid of the final scratches and also make it nice and transparent again. Now this is not a perfect solution, but it does look a lot better than the standard way it was mounted. So like I said, the rear wheels were cut off again and then readjusted, and once I was happy with that adjustment, I could move on to finishing off the rear section with that rear bumper also readjusted as well. The rear wheels actually weren't really all that bad compared to the fronts, as those were simply way too high. So those got the same treatment. They cut off at the hubs and then repositioned with some glue, touched up with some paint, and that completely fixed it, made it look a lot better and mimic the stance of the movie car as well. I then moved on to doing the panel lines. The standard black panel line accent color might be a little bit too dark, so I toned it down about 50-50 with some lighter gray panel line accent color, and then applied that to all of the panel lines. A couple of decals were put onto the wheels and also onto the spoiler to finish those sections off. I could then glue in all of the clear parts for the headlights, which now had enough time to cure. I added a black border around it with a permanent black marker to simulate the rubber or sealant that is usually on those parts and make it look a lot better. And I could then put my attention to the final parts, which were the rear view mirrors. The mirrors in the kit are not even close to the ones on the movie car. The ones on the movie car are a sort of racing style, very slim mirror, a very tiny one. I just printed some files from Blackbox STL that I had that mimicked these mirrors pretty well, cut off the main foot for the mirror and created my own, as it simply was for a different car, I believe a Mazda RX-7, and that didn't really fit onto this one, so I had to create my own small foot. That was bent and glued into place after drilling some small holes, and with that said, this one is now completed. Overall, I'm really happy with the outcome of this build. There are some small incorrect items on this build, but overall, with a lot of those different movie cars looking very similar but everyone having a different detail, I think I took a fair midpoint and made it look as good and accurate as possible without going crazy. It took a little while to do, but overall I'm really happy with it, and now it can finally be put in place with the rest of its friends. I hope you guys enjoyed this video series. I do still have a lot more Fast and Furious cars to build, and a lot more that I want to build as well. So if you guys would like to see more of them, do let me know down in the comments below, and I'll be sure to keep up with it. I'm not going to go crazy. I'm going to do other builds as well, but I do still really like these cars, so I hope you guys do too, and I'd like to see you guys next time. Let me know in the comments what you think of this build and what you would like to see in the future, and I'll see you again very soon.